I teach at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. I'm a political scientist, but right now Dean of the School of Economics and Political Science. And it's really a great pleasure to introduce the really honored guest, who's a distinguished alumnus of my university, Dr. Christoph Heusgen. Christoph, before studying at the University of St. Gallen, was a guy growing up in Westfalen in the city of Neuss, which is near Düsseldorf, for those of you that don't know it. He spent some of his high school years in the United States, studied then in St. Gallen and at the Sorbonne in Paris. Again, in that time, spent an exchange year in the United States. After that, he really had a rapid rise in the German Foreign Service. He worked in the office of the then Foreign Minister Klaus Kinkel in a time of great optimism, the end of the Cold War, what looked like the dawn of a new political era in Europe and perhaps the world. He then worked for the High Representative for Foreign Policy of the European Union, Javier Solana, and in those days wrote basically the European security strategy, which in a certain way was a response to the national security strategy that the then Bush administration had put out. He then was tapped by Angela Merkel to be the national security advisor for the German chancellor. He did that for, I think, the longest serving national security advisor in Germany until just this past year when Germany tapped him to be Germany's ambassador to the United Nations, permanent representative of the Federal Republic of Germany to the United Nations. And so it's just really a great honor to have such a distinguished alumnus of the University of St. Gallen here. Christoph, welcome to DLD New York.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
I think it's safe to say that we are both convinced that the digital revolution is changing our lives on a daily basis, also changing the nature of politics and the nature of international politics, but neither of us are experts in this field. And so what I thought we could do is try to draw some links between developments in the digital world and the world of politics, which is where you work and what I study. And I thought one way we could do this was to kind of go back in time a bit to Davos, which is a town just about 80 kilometers, 100 kilometers maybe, into the mountains from St. Gallen, where you studied and I teach. And in February of 1996, a guy named John Perry Barlow, who many of you I know, issued what he called a declaration of independence, a declaration of digital independence. And in those days, the idea was that cyber and digital technology was going to create the possibility for something like a digital anarchy. And this digital declaration of independence argued that governments should stay out of the world of cyberspace, stay out of the world of digital technology. We're forming our own social contract, he said. The governance that will arise here will arise according to the conditions of our world and not yours. Legal concepts of property, expressions of identity, all this don't apply. We're creating something quite different. If we speed up to today, though, we now have citizens on both sides of the Atlantic demanding from their governments something like a regulation of this digital sphere, demanding laws to protect their privacy. We see companies demanding government action to protect them against cyber criminality. We see the kinds of arguments that we just had in the preceding presentation, which is that governments need to get in there and break up these monopolies. You've been dealing with politics both from this perspective of someone in the government, at the heart of government, in the chancellery with Angela Merkel, but also as a diplomat. Is it time to wake up from this dream of digital anarchy and a world free from the tyranny of government?
Yes, I think you described the situation quite well, that there was this new era of digitalization, and this digital world opened, and somehow in government or governments were to a certain degree detached from that development. But there were a number of wake-up calls, and you mentioned my career when I started in the Office of the Chancellor in 2005. Shortly after, we had a situation where the state of Estonia was, from one day to the next, there was a total blackout. It was because Estonia and Russia were at odds on a certain political questions, and then our Russian partners thought that they play a game, and from one day to the next, Estonia was totally blacked out because the Russians were able to block the internet, and the Estonia, country that is actually ahead in digitalization, was all of a sudden not functioning anymore. And when you look at the digital age and see what it means in many respects, we can come to this country and the discussion that you have right now about the influence by Russia again on the elections, and how through the internet Russia influenced the campaigns here. We had that in Germany 3 years ago. At the culminating point of the European refugee crisis, when there were a lot of challenges for the Merkel government, and our Russian friends who didn't really like this conservative government in Berlin did everything to even increase the worries of the people by infiltrating the internet. But beyond politics in general, all the idealism, I think we have seen has passed. We have the internet now being misused in many respects. Our children, when they look at what is happening in Facebook and the anarchy there, what you have, then also child pornography, what you have, arms sales, you have the dark net, where things you have the radicalization through internet, people going into the jihad. So there has to be anarchy doesn't lead to something positive.
If the proponents of the new brave world of digital communication, of cyberspace, were promoting a dream of anarchy, were you guys in government asleep at the wheel?
Yes, I don't know, asleep at the wheel, but when there are new developments coming, governments are not the organizations that react the fastest to it. They are slow. They're slow, and I think it took a long time to wake up and to see, well, we have to fight that. We have to protect our internet, but then also we have to see how we defend our societies against this influx from the outside. But better late than never, and I think this is now on the internet, how to deal with it, how to deal with the attacks on our liberal societies. This is something that is very up on the agenda, and the new German government has digitalization in general, but also how to deal with cybercrime, cyber war, how to react to it on the top of its agenda.
So, I wonder if we're talking about something like a dream of cyber anarchy, if sort of the waking up from that dream allows us to place the whole phenomenon in a different context. Was digital, or is the world of cyberspace so different from the world of politics that we live in general, or is it just a particular case? And what I mean here is, if you think about back to the claims of digital independence in the mid-1990s, this is the time when you're sitting in the Foreign Office in Germany and thinking about an expansion of the European Union, thinking about the expansion of cooperation in general. We were going to integrate the former states of Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, into something like a rule-based order in the international system, and we're all quite optimistic. And today, we don't seem so optimistic. And that would suggest that maybe there's nothing quite so special about cyber, but rather politics in general is kind of rearing its head, and we're getting back into a world of nationalisms, of demands for new borders, new controls, whether it's in cyberspace, whether it's immigration, migration. Do you see these developments as somehow linked? And do you think the time of optimism for a world based on rules, a rules-based international system, that's a passé idea, that time has passed?
Well, I don't know if these things are really directly related. There are two phenomena which maybe run in parallel. First, on the first question, the basic question, do you need to somehow create rules for internet? And there, I must say, there is we have with internet, with the digital age, and the challenges we have, the same challenge that we have in the classical political life. So you need a rules-based order. I think you cannot exclude one part of society, one part of communication, one part of the everyday dealings of people. You cannot keep a free space there. You have to regulate it. You have to regulate it that the personal freedoms, the rights of the individuals are protected, just as they are protected outside. You have to see that an attack, as I mentioned on Estonia, when they tried to block, sabotage their internet, their government, this is basically the same as a armed attack and invasion of another country. So you have to apply the rules that you in the real world also on internet, and you have to. It's difficult to find in every case a parallel, but for me it is clear also this part has to be regulated. And what to your second question about European expansion of the European Union, I think in Europe, to a certain degree, you have the same phenomenon as you have in this country. Europe, actually the European Union, is the best example of globalization. We in Europe tore down all the borders. We have one currency, one big market. This is one European global market, and now we have this, in the real global world. And there are winners and losers, and the losers try to see, well, how can they block the effects of global on them? And then they turn national, they turn nationalistic. They want to block out everything coming from the outside. And this is a phenomenon that you have, perhaps in particular in countries that have found their national identity very late after 1989. They have not been as mature as maybe Germany after much longer history. But even in Germany, you have now 15% of a right-wing party that is against Europe, that is against globalization, this is against foreigners, against the acceptance of refugees. So this is another phenomenon. Yeah.
So if we were to think about ways of regulating cyber or digital, we could think about it as a national project, a series of national projects, or we could think about it as an international project. And the international project would presume that the recipe or the idea of a multilateral rules-based system is still applicable. And yet that seems to be under stress from a variety of sources. It's under stress from the sorts of nationalisms and populisms you were just speaking about. It's under stress from actors who don't want to play by the rules, who see some advantage in breaking the rules or being outside of the rules. You could think about Russia, you could think about China. And then you have a country that has traditionally been at the forefront of building this rules-based system, the United States, seeming to turn its back on that. How can you continue to make the case for the relevance of the rules-based system when the preconditions for that seem to be breaking away?
Yeah. Two questions again, two responses. First, with regard to regulations of internet, what you can do and what you cannot do. I go back again to my own job that I had before. One of the toughest days I had was when I was called by the U.S. ambassador in Berlin, who told me there may be a chance that that we had tapped the telephone of your chancellor. And this, when it was clear that American services listened into the chancellor and others, there was a lot of uproar. And we went to the UN, and there we adopted together with our Brazilian friends. The Brazilian president had the same pleasure. We have a UN resolution to safeguard the privacy in digital age. You can adopt this, and we have a general rule, but this still doesn't that everybody follows this. I think that you have to have these rules. At the same time, when you talk about the big platforms, those who are responsible for all the internet, they have to have some kind of code of conduct, what is allowed and what is not allowed. And there, the UN Secretary General, you are in the UN right here, actually has this very high on his agenda. He wants to get the main players of these platforms together to see if they cannot have a code of conduct. So things that I mentioned before that happen in internet today, that the platforms see to it that this doesn't happen. Second, Germany has always been a supporter of a rules-based international order. This is something that we learned from our history. Between 70 years before 1945, there were 3 wars in Europe, all more or less caused by Germany. But after 45 years, 70 years without it. Why do we have that? Because we have a rules-based international order in Europe. The European Union is a rules-based system. In every meeting of the European Council, of European working groups, there is always the legal service sitting at the table, seeing what you're doing. Is this in accordance with European law? We believe in a rules-based international order because we think that's the best way how dealings among states are best dealt with. And we see actually right now that this order is under stress. It's under stress from Russia. Russia, against all treaties, invades Ukraine. We have it in China, that China, against international law, goes into the South China Sea. And we have in this country that a president throws out the Paris Agreement, the president wants to throw out the Iran Agreement, which nobody says that, nobody can claim that it's violating, and just throws it out. So, and you have a question about, are rules that regulate the life between people, between countries, are they now questioned? And what is going to be the alternative to it? And I'm afraid of this alternative. So we will promote a rules-based international order also when we can make a bit PR here. We are running right now for a seat in the Security Council for 2019, 2020. And when we are in the Security Council, Germany wants to really support this rules-based international order.
Will you support the rules-based international order when it means punishing the violators, even when Russia blocks any concerted action in the Security Council? I'm talking, of course, of Syria and the violation of the chemical weapons prohibitions.
Well, first, what we did successfully do, and there the US and Europe played very well together after the invasion of Russia of Ukraine, we adopted very tough sanctions. We adopted very tough sanctions against Russia, and sanctions that really hurt Russia. On Syria, on the particular question you allude to, again, I have to point to the rules-based international order. Germany has a constitution which is very clear, which says when we can use force and not. And when you allude to the Syria case 3 weeks ago, when the US lead, the chemical weapons storage places were bombed, according to the German constitution, it's very difficult. First, you need for something an agreement of our parliament, and our constitution says you can only use military force when it's in self-defense, when it's in a UN operation, a NATO operation, or an EU operation. And in this case, all of these didn't apply. While the Chancellor said she fully understands the operation because the use of chemical weapons cannot be accepted. On the other hand, international law didn't see a legal possibility for us to participate. So what we have to do, we have to impress on our Russian friends and others that also in their interest is to go by international law. And Russia should do everything to prevent Assad from using it, and Russia should have a more constructive role in the Security Council. And this is, we have traditionally fairly good relations with Russia. This is what we'll try to convince them, that also for Russia it's much better to go by the rules-based order. Then they don't get sanctions and they have more chances to develop economically better.
We're running out of time, but let me ask you one last question. Just about a year ago, people were saying Chancellor Merkel would be the savior of the West. Nobody's worked as closely with her and knows her as well as you. When I watched her in Washington last week, I thought she was a diminished figure. Is she going to survive this legislative period? Will she stick out her term, and will she save the West?
Well, first, she has never said that she is there to save the world. Chancellor Merkel has been a person who has her principles. She wants to have Germany prosper, and she has over years done this successfully. She has Germany for the last 12 years has, with the exception of 2009, always a steady growth rate. We have the lowest unemployment rate ever in Germany right now. We have strengthened, we believe, the European Union, the Euro crisis. I think thanks to Germany, Europe came out stronger, still not strong enough. And we are very happy because I see now this competition, so to speak, with Macron. The Chancellor is the first one to say how happy we are that there is now a strong French president, because you need in Europe the combination of a strong Germany and a strong France, and Macron is doing a lot now to modernize the French economy, the French political system, and with a strong Germany, strong France, I think Europe is there to be a strong voice. You know, journalists, they get sick and tired if they have the same person 12 years there, a person without any scandal, a person who doesn't go out in the media every day and you know, kisses the president. She just, you know, she's the normal her, and you know, she's promoting women in Germany, the largest amount of women in a cabinet right now. She has a steady, and she doesn't care about if she's loved or not. She wants to drive her way forward. She has done that successfully. The longest serving women chancellor, they've never had one, but the longest one in Europe. And so she will do her job, and she doesn't care about polls or something. She knows how to work her way forward, and she'll do that successfully.
And she's got a great voice here in New York.
Well, so. You don't expect me to say anything different,
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Jen.